Start recording. There we go. So one of the tricks for the front foot, if you wanted to say get 4 polygons, because right now if you look at this, we do have, you know, if we're in 3 for face mode, you'll see that there is technically 4 polygons there. But that's not really the way toes are normally, right? You really should kind of have 4 this way, right? And technically, if you kind of look at it, we do kind of have 4, but that's not really the ideal 4 that we want, right? So one of the tricks that I like to use is to extrude along the side and back to kind of give us more geometry for the heel, as well as those extra toes, right? Having said that, though, I don't really want this edge loop here, right? I want to simplify this area a little bit. So if I go to 2 for edge mode, I can double left click, right? Double left click to select an edge loop. And remember, delete brings up your delete options. Now, you can specifically assign quick keys to delete faces and to dissolve edges, right? And you see I used Shift Delete and Control Delete, because you can't use delete. That actually brings up the menu for all the delete options, so you have to use a variant of delete. So Control Delete, because remember, when you're taking an edge loop out, you have to dissolve it, right? If you don't, it's going to leave the vertices behind. So you really, when you're taking edge loops out, it should be dissolve edges. There we go. And so just kind of simplify that area a little bit. But now it's going to make it a lot easier for me to go to 3 for face mode. And then I can select that face. Then I'm going to shift click here. Remember, I've assigned quick keys already to stuff like shortest path, right? So if you go to select link, there is a shortest path command. You can even use it with deselect and select to kind of stagger stuff. Just like checkerboard, there's actually some kind of neat features you can use there. If you want to. But shortest path is a great way to kind of do multiple edges, right? So I can shift left click there, shortest path. Now in this case, you see how it actually decided that this is the shortest path. So you do have to be kind of aware that sometimes the shortest path will kind of, you know, do something slightly different than what you expect. Usually it's great, but like there's like that 15% of the time where it might pick a slightly shorter path, right? But remember, there is select, linked, shortest path. So really, when you spend enough time with all these selection tools, Blender's got some pretty awesome ones, right? And strong workflows for them. They're pretty much up there with Modos. All right, so I really wanted these side polygons here, right? And these back ones and these other sides. Because then what I could do is I could right-click, right? Because remember, when you right-click, it brings up your context menu for faces, right? And one of those options is extrude faces along normal, right? Usually we're just used to just doing Control-E for extrude. And then we just middle mouse drag, and it just lets us do a view extrude. If you grab the yellow handle, it'll kind of extrude all of those polygons at their average, kind of an average normal direction, which sometimes is useful, sometimes not. But if you really wanted to extrude all your faces along their normal directions, remember, normal is the direction a polygon is pointing, right? The way it's facing. Pardon the pun, the way the face is facing, right? So along normal direction, if I use that, you'll see as I drag up or down, you see how it extrudes, right? So it created new geometry. But it did push these polygons out this direction. It pushed these polygons out this direction, right? And it pushed these ones out this way. So extrude along normal direction is, and a lot of you guys from last year remember this, it's 70% of the time it's not cool, it's not what you want. Like 70% of the time you're going to extrude, just do a view extrude, right? Just like we've been doing most of the time. But man, there's like that 30% of the time where extrude along normals is like, oh, it's awesome. It's like, it's exactly what you want, right? So mostly when I'm extruding, I just use extrude and just middle mouse drag to just do the view extrude. But man, sometimes extrude along normals is really, really, really cool. It's definitely less cool than not, right? There's definitely plenty of times when you're like, I didn't want that, right? And I'm just going to W to move it back, middle mouse button. And you'll see that now there's geometry for the heel. And of course, I can come back here and tweak these shapes a little bit to get them a little bit better. I can bring those back a little bit, of course, right? But you'll also notice that we do have 4 polygons on the front here now, right? So this is a great way to get properly 4 polygons for toes on the front here without creating n-gons, right? And by extruding along the whole thing, it gives you this nice little extra geometry for the heel. So it's kind of a win-win. Of course, you can use that for the rear foot. We didn't necessarily need to, though. It's quadrupeds often don't necessarily have 5 toes, right? Particularly if it's like a bird or something like that. Cats and dogs do, right? Mammals tend to have the 5 digits because we're all animals, right? So yeah, but that's a great way to get 4. If you needed a 5th, one of the ways you could always do it is just add an extra loop up the body, but that's a little bit tricky with this guy. But actually, usually when you look at animals, the 5th toe is off on the side, kind of more like a thumb kind of structure. So usually for any kind of quadruped, 4 is going to be good, and then kind of that extra toe can be like up here, here. That's where you have to kind of look at the anatomy of stuff. If you're ever making a horse, they just have one big toe. That's what they're actually walking on, is one big toe. There's actually little vestigial bones for the other toes inside the leg. They're not even sticking out. It's kind of weird. It's not kind of weird. It makes sense, but they're actually just walking on their big toe. So a horse's hoof is just a really, really hard toenail, right? It's made of the same stuff, just much harder, much more durable than our rinky-dink ones, right? So usually this is going to cover you well for that kind of stuff, right? So do you pretty well. Now in this case, I don't really necessarily need to do all 4 of them. I think I'll just do like 3. But I just want to make sure to show you this cool little trick for feet, right? And this would stand for human feet also, right? It's just a way to give you a little bit more geometry around the sides and the heel, and give you these kind of 4 better loop-structured polygons up here. So we didn't do that on the back foot, and it's okay, you don't have to, but I just want to make sure you guys got a video showing you this cool little trick. It, of course, can be used on the back foot. You would just kind of, you know, it would wrap around all the way here. So you'd have an extra edge loop up here on the heel. It's a neat little trick. Not absolutely necessary for your quadruped if you're not going for 4 toes, right? Or you're only doing 2 and then some off the side. But kind of cool here. So in this case, you know, I'll maybe move this out a little bit, move that in a little bit. You can always do little shapes with your tweaking, right? Your tweak tool's on. Remember, Q toggles you through those, but of course you can set a quick key up as well. There we go. And then I can select that one. What's great about the tweak tool is it still works as a selection tool, right? So you can actually keep that on a lot of the time and then do a lot of the other selections and then just use it as tweaking. And I kind of love that, actually. I've really kind of grown to really enjoy that. So, of course, Control-E and middle mouse drag for that extrude along view. Maybe a E for rotate, middle mouse button for view rotate, and then one more, Control-E for extrude. Remember that extrude tool's right there, though. Remember, they're right here. Loop cuts right there, extrudes right there. Remember, anytime you see a little triangle, if you hold down the left mouse button on it, you'll get other options. There's extrude along normals. You can extrude each polygon separately if you have multiple. You can even extrude your cursor, which I found is kind of interesting, but kind of clunky. I don't think it really adds anything for me. I just would extrude, move, rotate, extrude, move, rotate. There is extrude manifold, which is actually a lot like SketchUp. 3D SteerMax has a tool like this as well. So kind of neat, but you will be making meshes that are not quads if you use extrude manifold, right? So I'll just do a middle mouse drag again. R for scale, right? R is your quick key for scale, but remember they're all right here, particularly if you're in a modeling layout. And of course, middle mouse button does your uniform scale. So remember, middle mouse button really has, see how it says right down here, middle mouse, resize? So remember, you actually, that middle mouse button's really put to great and effective use in Blender. It's kind of like the way Maya does it, except it's actually better in my opinion, because Maya will use whatever your last handle selected was. So if I was scaling along the Z-axis, the blue, in Maya, if you did middle mouse button, it would scale along the blue. And I'm like, that's kind of annoying, actually, a little bit in Maya. It's kind of cool, but it's kind of annoying. I love the fact that it just by default does your uniform scale, and if you're move and rotate, is the view move and rotates. Because if I wanted to do those, I'll just grab them. So I'm definitely a fan of that. Blender kind of took what Maya did, but in my opinion, made it cooler. So we can just kind of, do that a little bit, and then of course go back to our tweak tool. 2 for edges, so we can shape that a little bit, and maybe double left click to select the edge loop. Middle mouse button, W for move, middle mouse button for view move. And then, of course, we could go to, say, 3 for faces. And I'll select that face, do a Control-E for extrusion. So once again, we can see extruding is kind of, well, the way you make legs, fingers, toes, right? Control-E for extrude, middle mouse drag, R for scale, E for rotate, maybe a little bit else button for the view rotate. And you just kind of see from here if we're kind of where we want to be. There we go. You can always go to 2 for edges. There we go. And then we'll do this last one, 3 for face mode. Control E for extrude. Middle mouse. And then we'll make this one a smaller one, so kind of bring it out there. Maybe E for rotate, middle mouse button. There we go. Control E, middle mouse drag. R for scale, middle mouse to do uniform scale, right? It says size. It's resizing it. Maybe W for move. There we go. And then, of course, we go back to 2 and Q, because I've kind of still got that set up. I have a quick key set up for it, but I try to remind you guys because you might, it's not default quick key. And now you see how we can kind of get our nice little kind of 4 toes on the front there. And of course, as we go, we can keep shaping it to adjust the forms, right? If we want these a little thicker, we can just tweak some edges. And now we got some toes there on the front, right? And as you go, like I said, you can keep adjusting the shape. So you're always going to be shaping. But I figured it'd be kind of neat for you guys to get to see a little bit of how, if you kind of do a neat little extruder back around the sides, that does give you more geometry to work with for shape here, while keeping it all quads and star minimum, right? And now you have this ability to do 4 if you wanted to. But you could do 3, you could just do one large one and one small one, right? You could do an extrusion for a toe that's 2 polygons if you wanted a really fat toe, right? So you can actually kind of support all kinds of different variations there, right? So even if you set up your model to have 4 toes, or at least support 4 toes, you don't have to do 4 toes, right? So it's kind of a neat little trick that I like to show off there that's kind of a pretty cool little method. But really it was just extruding, wasn't it? Right? I did take an edge loop out there because we kind of had that extra one. And then it was about selecting specific polygons and extruding them, or extruding along normals and things like that. And then just some shaping, as is usually the case, right? There's always shaping. And that's where that tweak tool is great, because you can just, you know, just left-click drag. All right. So I think that'll be a great place to stop for that, and then I'll kind of just do a little bit of review here. So I'm just going to turn off the recording. So stop that.